We're back with the full team. It's good to have us all part of the podcast again. We've been split up recently when we had some guests on, but we're back to just us. Nobody wants to join in this time around. Just kidding. How are we all doing?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good.
You've been on the circuit recently down in London at various different data and AI conferences. Can you tell us all where you have been? Have you been participating? You speaking at any
I
of the
spoke
events?
at Digit, had a fintech thing. I gave an initial chat a few weeks ago, and then next week I'm at London AI Summit.
Very
So
good.
see how that goes.
I was at Gartner in London. Wasn't talking, but lots of really, really interesting and interesting talks, and yeah, really enjoyed it. 3 days in London. What's not to like? That was
Yeah,
really
not 100%. I've not been down this year actually. I need to get going. Megan, yourself?
Yeah, Thursday I'll be speaking at the Digit Expo, and it's the first external talk I've given since coming back from mat leave. So yeah,
Oh,
might be a little
nervous?
bit rusty. Yeah,
Nervous?
yeah, nervous, but we'll manage. We'll be all
Oh,
right.
and Megan and I fortuitously were on a panel, a roundtable together, weren't we? Like a week or two
Yeah,
ago.
that was good fun. Yeah,
Very
yeah.
good.
Data Impact Leadership Roundtable, I think it was.
I'm a bit disappointed it didn't come through the podcast to get access to you guys. I thought that was
Speak to my
exclusive
manager.
contracts. And also, we're in Keep Fit season. Given it's the summer, we've got some training activities to look forward to. Ishbel, you've been smashing the high rocks and telling everybody about at Gartner that you're a
try not to,
professional.
like I was saying, don't get invited to brunch when all you do is talk about high rocks. But yeah, smashed high rocks. Definitely doing it again. Loved it. But yeah, signing up to 10Ks. Keeping up with the running because that's where it's all at for high rocks as well. So yeah,
Good on you.
You had a great time as well.
I
You
know.
and your partner for
We
High
didn't
Rocks,
even
didn't you?
fall over at the end of it. So
No, what was your do you remember your time? It was
Oh yeah, 1 hour 14, 53 seconds. So yes, smashed
Smashing
it.
That is good.
That's crazy.
Steph is she's been doing like a functional fitness class for about a year and a half, and it's totally changed her life. And she's keen to sign up, but she says she'll never do the mixed partners with me. Doesn't like
Oh.
training me at all.
Oh, really?
So
Never
Well,
I need
say
to find
never.
somebody
enough.
else.
we want to do it next year, Haley and I. We went to our first class a few weeks ago. A friend of ours ran it. And she said she actually phoned her afterwards and was like, it's actually quite emotional. You and Andrew were like so supportive. I've never seen a couple like so kind of in sync, a good team and stuff. And I was like, that'll change come race day. Don't worry.
I can imagine
Wait
it's
till
your
the
ages.
crunch.
If I've got to
I
do
Wait till
saw
the
a
crunch.
reel. It was like a couple, like she'd collapsed on the floor and he just picked her up by her thing and shoved her on her way, and that was it. It was like, nah, up you go. I'll carry on.
That'll be Haley picking me up, definitely.
I love to have a supportive partner.
Yeah, very, very much so. Anyway, we're not here to talk about high rocks, unfortunately, because I know Ishbel, you'll be talking about it for days.
Yeah.
But we are here this week to talk about the role AI is having on the job market, and maybe in particular talk about the Scottish data science market, and yeah, the role that AI is having on that at the moment. So we thought we would kick us off by talking about what companies are looking for at the moment for kind of data science roles, because we're seeing more and more people with profiles full of large language model type experience and less, or even job descriptions with requirements for traditional machine learning, and the new evolution of roles like AI engineers and AI scientists. So thought we would get your thoughts on that, guys. Who wants to open it up?
I'm happy to kind of to go first. Like, so we saw some really interesting talks around this in Gartner, and like one of them was like the forgotten art of data science in the world of like Gen AI. And I think like, and there was also a lot of conversations around like how do you drive value. So like AI is like you would bring in a lot of people efficiency and things, but there's not necessarily a tangible financial benefit to that. So obviously like you free up, I think the average was 14 minutes a day in someone's day through AI, but it's like, well, how much did you actually add to like EBITDA or like the value of a company or whatever through like AI, right? So I think this guy's talk, sorry, I've forgotten his name. But this guy's talk on the art of data science was like, well, actually you could drive more value from machine learning rather than an LLM. So I think like because there's quite a lot of exec hype around around LLMs or using AI in general for efficiencies, then you're kind of forgetting that, you know, your typical regression or XGBoost or whatever would actually, you know, more readily deliver your pounds and pence than an LLM. It's just like jumping on the bandwagon. I'm not saying that there's not value there, but I think we've really forgotten what the bread and butter is of data science as well as all of that. So that's my kind of, yeah, thoughts around it.
Why would that be, Andy and Megan, for your take on that? What would you think? It's just because, as you say, people are jumping on the bandwagon, or companies are desperate to know how AI can impact it, or it's just that already things have changed from, like, say, graduate MSc programs, that they're no longer very statistical focused. There's a different kind of method being taught.
Personally, I think we're still in that phase of, you know, we've got this new shiny hammer, so everything looks like a nail. So it's like, you know, we're just trying to shoehorn it everywhere. Whereas I think, to your point, Ishbel, about more traditional ML, potentially there's a selection effect where naturally with an ML use case you have to be a lot more focused on what the actual problem is, because, you know, there's specific data, specific model selection, specific features. There's a lot of decisions you have to make just to get started. Whereas with an LLM now, you can just sort of throw it at something and get started. And I think we're still, and again, Ishbel picked up on an interesting point there about, you know, that productivity piece. Everything seems to be a productivity play. I shared a thing on LinkedIn recently. I also can't remember who said it, so it's not
That's
good.
right. I should look
Um,
up his name because he really was
yeah,
brilliant.
I'll try to find my one as well. But, you know, someone was saying, sort of paraphrasing, I'd said, basically, if you're trying to use AI just as an efficiency play and maybe cut capacity in your org, get rid of people, you know, or whatever, you're really suffering from a lack of imagination. You should really be thinking, how does this extend out? But I think that's all kind of, we're falling into a bit of a rut, I think, where everyone thinks it's about squeezing out a little bit of productivity. Whereas there's going to be amazing use cases. I just think we've not developed the frameworks and mental models yet of how to use it. That's my kind of take on it. I don't know. I think there is a bit of a lost art there, Ishbel, like you're saying, and the ROI thing is naturally hard as well, because now it's going to be seen as a base enabler. It's not a differentiator. Everybody's got an AI assistant, so what's, you know, you enabling that in your company is not enough to say you're driving massive ROI. So yeah, I think it's a combination of things.
Megan, you've just went through a hiring drive. What did you see in kind of profiles, or what specifically were you looking for? And then what kind of
Yeah,
mix the skills did you want to see?
I'd say we're very much in the midst of that. So I think just focusing on what we're doing within the organization, it would be really kind of foolish for someone to over-egg the LLM specific part based on what we've actually got in terms of projects and initiatives ongoing within, you know, the BBC. And I'm sure this is representative of the wider industry, but, you know, not everything has changed overnight from traditional machine learning application to, oh no, suddenly we're retiring all of that stuff, it's old hat, and we're all going to do foundation model driven development. So I think from the candidate point of view, it pays to be really careful that you're not kind of throwing all of that existing coding and statistical know-how out of your application and focusing only on the cutting edge, because actually you're going to need that, you know, long-standing traditional skill set if you come to work for most organizations. If I was to try and put a number on it, I'd probably say that we're split somewhere around 50% focused on LLM application, which I think that's going to change, and it might change quite rapidly, but it gives you a real hint of what it is we're actually doing at ground level. And I think it is very far from the case that everything can and should be done with the LLM hammer, as Andy described it. You know,
You said it was
it's
going to change. Is it
becoming,
going to go up or down? Do you think more LLM use cases or less? Or
I think it will go up, certainly at the BBC, but I think that might be quite specific to the media application, where we've got a lot of use cases that are actually around the manipulation and use of language. And different media formats. I think in a lot of other organizations and other industries, there actually aren't that many spaces where a large language model and the ability to manipulate natural language or media is of that much relevance. And you are much more often looking at tabular data, traditional formats of input and the existing techniques being the ones that you want to focus on using. But yeah, it's still like a small slice of the pie. And what I'm really interested in is there are applicants and there are people coming through that have like gone so wholesale into that, in terms of their recent experience and the description of the skill sets that they've built through master's programs, that you can't tell whether they're then able to work in that other 85% of the kind of traditional application. So I would advise people to be very careful before they really like over egg that side of their experience.
It's not something I planned on asking, but when you talked about 50% of the role being LLM applications, what skills do you need to do that? What are you looking for? And I know that'd be more on the kind of GenAI side.
15%,
Oh,
just to
50.
be
Oh,
really
that makes sense
clear.
from the 85
Like
that
we
you
are
just
still
mentioned.
just
Sorry,
really like
15, right.
edging into that space. It's nowhere near 50%. Um, the
But
kinds
even,
of skills, the kinds of skills that I'm looking for that 15% are quite far away from prompt engineering and the ability to ask the right question of a large language model. That's a part of it, but much more of it is how you get this stuff to stand up in production, how you de-risk it, how you evaluate it, and how, to Ishbel's point, you actually can tell whether or not it's adding value or driving efficiency. If you can do all of that stuff, you can then prove that it's the right tool to use. If you can't do that stuff, you're probably occupying a role that anyone could start to get quite proficient in quite quickly.
I think that maybe answers my next two questions, but I'll put it out to you. So what I was going to ask you was, the companies know what they're looking for when they're advertising for an AI engineer, an AI scientist, and then really what would you say a description of an AI engineer or AI scientist was if you're differentiating from a traditional data scientist? But yeah, I think you might have answered a bit of that there. I'm not sure what your takes on it
I
might be, Ishbel.
yeah, I put up again on LinkedIn the other day. I saw so many posts like
I was
people
going,
getting really
yeah,
people get angry now about things like this. They're like getting angry about people saying you don't need an AI engineer because you're not building a foundation model, and someone else was like, everyone's calling themselves an AI engineer, but they're really something else. And there was a bit like, right, okay, to me, an AI engineer is just trying to capture the idea that these systems we're building, they do have slightly different sets of kind of priorities versus building a traditional ML system. So a traditional ML system for me is, you're going to own the model end to end. You're going to build all the feature ingestion piece. You're going to build pipelines for the deployment, etc., etc. On the AI side, you are going to consume the model more as a commodity and build some little thin layer on top of it to prompt it, guide it, guardrail it, curate it, or whatever. And then the focus, to Megan's point, I think, or part of the point she made, there's going to be a bigger focus on evals because you're not in control of that. You're going to think a lot more about how do I evaluate this, how do I monitor this, how do I, how do I try and apply control in something where I've not controlled the full supply chain? And that to me is just kind of, and a lot of the things we're building, I would say, kind of my day to day is a bit more user facing than what I was used to. Because before it'd be a lot of back end pipelines. I think that's starting to happen again, which is kind of interesting. But now it's a lot more chatbots. It's a lot more building something that manages the chat history. It's building something that you answer a question and inject that back into a chat history. That sort of thing wasn't typical in a lot of ML use cases. So at least sort of in my experience. So, but I think I've actually we're recruiting just now and for a kind of not that many roles, but just a couple of roles. And I actually almost explicitly tried not to mention the AI piece. I called them like MLOps engineer, and I was just like, because it was more a platform ask. It was like, think about the platforms and all these traditional software tasks. And then I've sort of slipped in a little bit. This will be used in AI applications. But to Megan's point, I don't want people coming at me and saying, "Oh, I've got a ChatGPT account and I can prompt really well." That to me is not what I'm looking for. So it's interesting. I think it is different, but the skills you're often looking for are the more traditional software engineering, or on the data science side, the more traditional stat stuff. You're maybe just applying them in a slightly different context. That's been my experience anyway.
We're still doing quite a lot of like traditional AML or stats, traditional stats based models. So for me, like when you look at recruitment and you've got somebody coming in and you know that your role or your needs aren't necessarily building LLMs, or then for me, I'm like, well, so if you get somebody in and really they're looking for a job, but they don't necessarily, they really want to be doing AI and LLMs because that's the way that they think that all of the industry is going to go. Does that mean then that you spend all this time kind of training somebody up for them to leave in 6 months' time when, you know, the market does continue to open up, there are more roles in AI related LLM building kind of niche places? That's kind of like a worry for us, like, you know, so when I'm interviewing people, it's like, well, what do you really want to do? Where do you see yourself in the long term? You know, do you understand the hype versus like the need for data science within all of this? Like, that's kind of something that I think about, you know, I don't want to spend my time training somebody up for them to leave, you know, quite quickly. Because obviously that's a time investment, it's a cost, it's re-advertising, it's all of that.
I think I focus on really quite similar risks when recruiting, and one of the ways I try and spell it out is that I'm looking for what I would describe as a product data scientist. So it's not someone that's going to go into a problem space and ask themselves what's the shiniest, coolest thing I can do. It's someone that's going in to understand what is the user or the stakeholder need here and how can it be best solved. And then the tools that get selected aren't just the ones that are like the career builders or the exciting hype driven ones. They're the ones that actually solve the problem. And if you can get people that come into that come into the space with that sort of pragmatic mindset of like they will use the tool that's suitable for the job rather than just the thing that's
That they want to use.
trending.
So you were all hiring recently, so good. It's a good place to be, and not juniors, so like people who've got experience, but say mid-level kind of data scientist engineers. Is that right? Would I be right in saying that?
I think some of mine are junior.
Fairly junior.
Yeah, whole
Right,
mix.
are you,
Not grad, but just
not
just
grad, but yeah, sort of maybe a year, second job.
Yeah,
or
a year or
maybe.
two. Yeah.
So what was your first hand experience? What did you see from applicants in terms of how they positioned themselves? Was it 75% LLM focused, but 25% more of the traditional ML kind of skills? And then what first hand, were they interested? We want to work with everything that's cool and shiny, or were they taking the product led approach? What did you see from the aspiring kind of?
We're gonna start with the elephant in the room. We saw a lot of applications full stop, and the volume suggests to me that a lot of these applications are not necessarily that handcrafted or thoughtful. So we had an example of a role where we had over 700 applications, one role. It's not typical, and it hasn't been typical for the last few months. But as you dove through those applications, I could probably count not quite on one hand, but certainly count in the sub 100 kind of numbers, the number of those applications that were tailored to the specific job advert. I could also count in the hundreds the number of those applications that were quite generic and didn't give a whole lot of confidence in me that they were actually handwritten. So I think we're starting to move into an era where people are really using AI tools to create their application. And I don't really actually have a problem with that if it's done well, if that resulting application is both tailored to the job ad and reflects your specific experience. But see the like super generic, like I am not learning anything new about you kinds of like application that someone's just thrown into ChatGPT and then popped into the recruitment portal, it's exhausting to go through them. I really hope we kind of get over that phase where people are just excited to have their application written for them and they aren't really checking.
What were the titles of your roles out of interest, or like the ones that were kind of was it like data scientist, or was it GenAI person, or what was the?
We have almost always kept to the title of data scientist. There's a few reasons that I tend to do that, but I think it really is responsible for us keeping quite a varied group of skills represented in the applicants that we're seeing. But we have added to titles the relevant domain or problem space, and sometimes included, like you were describing, like AI in the description to try and give a bit of a steer. But yeah, I tend to stick to data scientists because I think it tends to represent the skill set that is really diverse in terms of the background. You know, it's not all people coming from computer engineering degrees, although it does include some of that. It also captures that group of people that are coming up through different data tracks, maths, physics, and those wider STEM fields. So I think it's sort of catching the right people's eyes from my point of view.
Don't hire physics people, Megan. They're terrible.
No, wouldn't advise that.
What about using an AI powered tool to do that screen? So you've had 750 applications that you've maybe screened between, I don't know, a bunch of your senior managers or whatever. Would you use a platform to screen for you?
Well, isn't that interesting? I didn't.
But I'm worried about that because you've got AI writing the CVs and then you've got AI reviewing them. So
I know. But yeah, I saw the volume come through, more than 700. We read them, every one of them, humans. I don't know what it's going to take to push me into wanting to automate that process, but even that kind of scale, as difficult it is for hiring managers to commit and get through it manually, I still feel it's so valuable. Like, I wouldn't be able to talk to you today with that level of insight about the kinds of applicants we were seeing and what my decision-making process is if I hadn't practiced that and gone through all those CVs, is my opinion. But
I've seen recently is like, you, in a way, it's like, why didn't, some of them are obvious, you didn't use AI to write your CV, for example. So like, you still get examples where they're like, you could make it look a lot better, flow a lot better. So there's cases where people don't, and it's like, well, don't you know how to use the productivity tools that you've got around to help you sound a bit better? So it's kind of like a bit of a double-edged sword. Don't use it too much, but do it enough to make me know that you're going to be, using it to your advantage within the role, kind of thing. It's like, I have seen a bit of that. There's also the case, like, absolutely agree, like, you review it as a human, taking your interpretation of what somebody's put in their CV or an application. That doesn't necessarily give you a true picture of what somebody is like in real life. So I really do think that, it is like a process. You review them. Like, I've read ones and it's like, well, they don't sound amazing on paper. And then I interview them and I'm like, do you know what? They are amazing. Like, that's a brilliant person. So whether they, write it up a certain way, I think you do still have to have that kind of like, we're never going to have AI giving our interviews, are we? We're still going to be there making the decisions, meeting the people, asking them.
Well,
No,
no.
really? Oh,
I saw a
no.
thing recently, someone did that. Yeah.
No
There are tools that will do automatic review of candidates reading their interview
video
responses.
recordings.
So it's like an interview, but it's entirely without a panel. It's just automated.
I saw one the other day. Someone shared a video and it was like, I turned up to first stage of recruitment. It was an AI avatar I was speaking to.
I cannot think of a worse candidate experience.
Terrible.
What says to a person more clearly, we don't really value you as a human being enough to give you even 10 minutes of our time to listen. Like, it's a bit
I have a better one. Someone said that, well, it's not AI related, but someone said the other day that they held back from a recruitment process to say, sorry, we didn't review your CV in time and the role closed. We hope you know you're a valued candidate or whatever, and please would invite you to apply to other roles. That's pretty bad. That's probably just worse than the AI avatar, I would say. That's pretty bad.
But
on the AI point, sorry, I've just double checked this because I've been thinking a lot about governance and compliance recently, as I do working in financial services. I think CV screening is potentially a high risk application of AI according to the EU AI Act. So I worry about because I've not came across too many of those use cases yet. So I don't know what other guardrails need to be in place to make sure it's kind of all done above board and you're not doing social scoring and all these things. And I think there's a minefield in there. So just for anyone out there, just be aware.
We don't put CVs into an AI tool, yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because that's like, that's their private information. You can't put it in.
It's more than that. It's like the automated decision making. Someone has to understand the full end-to-end chain of decision making and understand how robust that was.
You're allowed to.
From bias,
You're obviously allowed to automate. Yeah, exactly. You're allowed to automate decisions, but there's specific categories of stuff in the EU AI Act that's called out as like high risk. And this one, because it impacts someone's career.
We've talked about this a wee while ago on the podcast, but I remember the early days of people trying to do this at scale automated selection of candidates, they were finding that the models were taken in, for example, when people tend to put like their interests and their wider hobbies on their CV, it would take something like I do women's football, and it would take the fact that women's was mentioned there and say, well, typically the high performing candidates that we've had come into jobs in this field have been male. So we're going to score that candidate down. And it just, I'm not convinced enough, as much as models have grown and got more performant, whether we've actually addressed a lot of those cultural and social biases yet to use it in these kind of spaces.
Definitely not. Definitely not. Definitely not. I even worry about using AI to summarize my emails in case I miss something important, right?
But
Because I know it's not
it does
foolproof.
still, obviously, it's still flawed. So,
Exactly. So
as
like
we
if
say,
you
it can
bad.
make things up.
But it was interesting as well you said about you should be using AI for this. I would prefer a little bit of an obviously human one. I kind of like that. Now, if it's really bad and there's terrible spelling mistakes and it's kind of
Yeah.
it's all over the place and they've doodled on it or
It's
something.
when they spearheaded everything. Who writes I spearheaded this and I spearheaded that? Like that's like, what's wrong with just saying I led this, or like like just don't, we don't need to spearhead anything. Like, just feel like that's the thing it always comes out with. I'm like, oh.
I'm generally not a fan of like war terminology in reference to the workplace.
I combated inefficiency.
Yeah. Did you? Take note, everyone applying to our jobs. Reduce the conflict.
Stop spearheading things.
But it's interesting. I think that's the biggest pain for good candidates in the market is the moment they just can't. They're not receiving any feedback on their applications and they're competing against mass applications, and it becomes impossible. And that's it. So that's a difficult one to kind of find out. I think there's market conditions that make that more of an impact than that. But
I'd really advise people, like we kind of said at the outset, if you can tailor your application to the person, the role, the hiring manager, speak to the reasons why this specific organization or this specific role is the right fit for you, and then talk about experience that really fits the needs of that business and the job advert you're applying to. I would say you're so much more likely to get that next stage in the review process and that interaction with a human being that can give you feedback. If you're throwing hundreds of low value applications where you're not doing that tailoring and you're not building that kind of wider application, then you're probably just never going to get any feedback at all.
Yep. I'm a big fan as well of like really concise bits of language. I love a bullet point in a CV. I love kind of just crisp. This is what. Maybe not.
This is a good question. This is a good question for everyone. How long does a CV have to be for like a mid-level role before you're not two pages? Oh,
I always advise 2 to 3 pages.
I would say that, or would you say, Chris? You're the expert. What would you say?
2 to 3 pages.
Right, 2 to 3. Right. So I would say it's kind of 2 to 3. I've seen minus 3 or something, right, which is way too long. I think, but I can never kind of get it sharp. But the key thing for me is like the first half page.
Yeah.
That's what gets you, right? It's like, who are you? And where have you recently been? What have you recently been doing? That grabs me, and then you'll skim the rest. You'll have a look if it's worth it. Because to your point, Megan, you're trying to get through so many. So it's like you're looking at that first half page, and that is to come out and say, I am this person. I'm interested in this. I'm good at this.
You need to be
is this what you're looking for?
Yeah. Like reading anything, you need to be hooked in on that first. But see if it's 8 pages long. I'm sorry.
No. But it's not that. It's the opposite. That used to be the problem. The modern problem
it's too
now
short.
is it's 1 page and there's no detail and just a list.
Too short. Wow.
Really? Too short.
Really?
Wow.
And just not mentioning.
So take
note,
depth. Guys. Take note from the man himself. Don't make it 1 page. Have some detail.
Reviewing those bad boys for 10 years. There's good sides about this podcast.
It's 1 page. I spearheaded so much.
Spearheaded everything.
You had everything. Forget what Ashbel says.
I am the spear.
Really well, and I've spearheaded everything.
Here's something I wanted to bring up. I've just completed a search today for a chief data scientist that I've been doing in Scotland. But it's always been something that I've spoke about, that there really is a lack of exec and leadership roles for all the data science leaders, because I actually think the chief data officer role is really held by data governance, data architecture, data engineering type candidates. But really when you get to the head of level, especially in Scotland, I think people are struggling. I think it's different maybe you work for a global organisation or somebody that's 10,000 plus employees that have got a lot more opportunities. But for most sort of mid to SMEs and sort of national organisations, there's maybe one or two opportunities across the board. What's you're all at this kind of similar level in your career? Where do you see this? And especially being based here, not that that completely restricts you, but it probably does to a point.
Yeah, it's tough. I think before I moved up to Glasgow, I remember sitting in an interview with someone where they said to me, if you move to Scotland, you will not be able to reach a certain height of leadership. It
They're
just will
quite small.
not. It just will not be something that is an option in your career. So you're going to have to be comfortable that if you move to Scotland, you will find a kind of a ceiling point. Hilariously, I absolutely blew that theory out of the water quite quickly. And here I am, which is a nice thing. But I think there's still a perception, particularly from those that are sitting in London or in larger cities across international markets, that it's not possible to do what we do from a smaller space. And by small, I don't want to be pejorative, but the idea that you're not in the base location or the head office location of your organization, I think that's such a shame, because that bias is really, Chris, I think, still impacting the market and the roles that people are making available. And I'd love to see organizations sort of looking at us as a group of leaders and seeing that you get fantastic people, not to, blow our own trumpet, but if you open up all levels of vacancies across locations, including Scotland, you're opening up to a fantastically rich and varied market. People who all do what they do in a place that they love and have a perfect work-life balance. What more could you ask for? It's a real shame that it's not done more.
100%. My thing, so how I compared it was, I think there was something like 25 CDOs in Scotland that were based in Scotland, but really I think the true reflection of that would have been lower, maybe something like 15. But from a CTO perspective, I think it was something like 700 plus. Again, I think a true reflection about that would be maybe 250 to 300. And obviously data maybe over the last 10 years kind of exploded, but it was more about the creation of that role in the exec for majority of organisations. Do you think that's necessary? Now, having seen how the impact and ROI or commercially that data can have.
I'd be interested. I don't know if you've done this or looked at this, Chris, but those kind of stats, how they reflect the size of the market here and the mix of the market more generally. So you're talking about far more CTO roles than CDO. That completely makes sense to me. And then when you're talking about the size of, like, say, the Scottish employment market, especially with like the data you've got a handle on, how big that is. I'm wondering. I don't even know what the baseline should be. I don't know if we're above or below what we would expect.
Yeah, compared to other
Normalize it with your
training measures.
population.
Around
there.
Give us the data.
Sorry.
But what do you think? Say there is a gap. What do you think it is, Chris? From your experience, is it that there's not enough, like you said, there's not enough big organisations here. There's not enough homegrown organisations here. Well, I don't know where the gap comes, basically.
I think I would jump in on that to say that at the size of organisation that we're each working in, you still would tend to expect far fewer data professionals compared to engineers. And so I would expect there to be far fewer opportunities at all levels and all seniorities for data leaders than there are for engineering leaders.
Yep.
So again, same question, Chris, is it wildly out of scale?
And I would just kind of color that by, I traditionally was a data person, but I'm now very much in the engineering piece. So I think my trajectory, if I was lucky enough, anyone listening, please promote me. But I'm in the org where I would go to CTO. In my organisation, we have CDOs, but to your point, Chris, it's more governance, data architecture type roles. It's not.
That's how the split is.
Engineering, AI, etc. That sort of is falling over this side now. But I've been in organisations where there was a CDO or a CDAO, or a CAO that's very much a data science, etc. pillar. But I don't know. I think it's kind of it's interesting.
Yeah, it's probably more and more because I've spent probably I probably recruited across Scotland and London for the first 5 years of my experience, and in the last 5 years, probably 80%, 85% in the Scottish market. But really, that creation of exec level or more senior level data managerial positions, the acceleration hasn't been the same as what it's been like at the more junior end, where
Right.
all the data engineers coming through and all the data scientists that were brought out of academia. So you would have expected the organisations to probably have created more senior opportunities at some point, and it's probably not been.
Still
So
expect
for it,
that to grow at a slower rate though, because obviously, like, you know, the actual doers doing, you would expect them to grow, but you wouldn't necessarily expect your leaders to be at the same rate. So maybe it depends, you know, how big a team it is, what is the value of the team, you know, like what are they covering in terms of their remit. But I
yeah,
do think the CDAO, you know, whether it would cover all AI, all like your governance, your infrastructure, like that could still be emerging. That's still like quite a relatively, well, a new role. So I
what
think
what would you expect that to cover then to bring it back? Are you thinking that you're in charge of everything from a data perspective? You're looking after science, analytics, engineering,
yeah.
governance,
So it's
data
not just the
management.
data science pillar. It's the wider. It is the governance, the security, your data structure. Because I do think all of that needs to be collectively linked to be as robust, efficient, and like, you know, I think that the strategy that covers all of that needs to be a collective thing.
You often get, as well, in my experience, and again, don't know what you've seen, Chris, but you'll maybe get CDO, CDAO roles, and it's actually not C-suite, really.
Yeah.
It's sort of reporting into CIO or CTO.
Well, yeah, I think it is. It
Yeah,
is a level below
Yeah,
C-suite. It is
often.
reporting into
Yeah,
the CIO
yeah,
generally from the
exactly.
discussions.
And that's interesting. I don't know. I think it's a big mix, and there's another debate to be had. It's probably another episode where I've seen people say that, you know, when you get to that level, it's not actually it's not it's obviously not a technical role anymore anyway, or maybe in some orgs it is, right. And I would kind of like to think that that'd be a trajectory I would like, but you know, sometimes people are saying that actually for that sort of level you may be better having people with business experience or kind of more financial management experience, you know, because they're more actually just managing a business function, and then they're delegating technical tasks down. So there's that as well. What if it's like environmentally we're actually good in Scotland at the technical piece, but you know it's we're maybe growing different types of leaders. I don't know. I think there's lots of explanations. I've no idea. I think we need the data,
to back
the
up.
live data hack on recruitment
We'll,
data.
we'll bring it to a future episode. But anyway, I think we covered a lot there, so it was great to see you guys and have you back on. And yeah, join us again soon for our next episode. Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. See you.
Boop, boop.